The sun dipped low on the horizon as the calm of the lakeside was suddenly shattered by desperate splashes and muffled cries for help. From the distance, a lone dog raced towards the water, its ears pinned back and eyes locked on a small figure struggling to stay afloat. What happened next would stun everyone who witnessed it. The lake was a serene place, nestled in the heart of a quiet countryside village. Families often gathered there on weekends, enjoying picnics by the water or watching their children play in the golden sand. On this particular day, the air was filled with the joyful sound of laughter and splashing water. Among the visitors was a 7-year-old boy named Ethan, whose boundless energy and love for adventure often led him to wander just a bit too far from his parents' watchful eyes. Ethan's parents, David and Claire, were sitting on a picnic blanket, enjoying the warm afternoon sun. They had chosen a spot beneath a tall oak tree, offering a perfect view of the sparkling lake. Nearby, a shaggy golden retriever named Buddy roamed around the shore. Buddy was a stray who had become somewhat of a village mascot. Everyone knew him, and everyone loved him. Despite having no owner, Buddy was fiercely loyal to the people of the village, often appearing in unexpected places, as if keeping an unspoken watch over them. Buddy's day had begun like any other. He had wandered down to the lake, drawn by the scent of sizzling barbecue and the laughter of children. He watched as families set up their blankets, tossed frisbees, and splashed in the shallow water. His tail wagged happily as kids occasionally came over to pet him or toss him a piece of leftover food. Ethan, always curious, had been eyeing a small wooden dock that jutted out into the deeper part of the lake. To him, it seemed like the perfect spot for an adventure. Without a second thought, he wandered away from the crowded shore, his small feet crunching on the gravel path that led to the dock. His parents, engrossed in their conversation, didn't notice him slip away. As Ethan reached the edge of the dock, he looked down at the water, mesmerized by how the sunlight danced on its surface. He crouched down, reaching out to touch the rippling water. But as he leaned forward, the old wooden planks beneath him creaked ominously. Before he could react, the rotted wood gave way, and Ethan plunged into the cold, deep water below. At first, there was silence, save for the soft lapping of the waves against the dock. Then came the sound of splashing, erratic and desperate. Ethan, who had never learned to swim, struggled to keep his head above water. His small arms flailed, and he gasped for air, panic setting in as the water pulled him under again and again. Buddy, who had been lying in the shade of a tree nearby, immediately perked up. His sharp ears caught the sound of the splashing, and his head snapped towards the dock. His brown eyes widened as he saw the small figure struggling in the water. Without hesitation, Buddy sprang to his feet, his instincts kicking in. Meanwhile, on the shore, David and Claire finally noticed their son's absence. As they scanned the area, their eyes fell on the broken dock and the ripples in the water. Realization hit them like a bolt of lightning. "Ethan!" Claire screamed, bolting towards the dock with David close behind her. But Buddy was faster. He raced down the gravel path, his paws kicking up dirt as he closed the distance to the dock. Without a moment's pause, he leapt into the water, his powerful legs propelling him forward. His golden fur glistened as he swam with purpose, his eyes locked on the boy who was now barely visible above the surface. Ethan, exhausted and terrified, felt himself sinking. But just as he was about to give up, he felt something brush against him. He opened his eyes to see Buddy's face, calm and determined. The dog nudged him with his nose, encouraging him to hold on. With the last bit of strength he could muster, Ethan grabbed onto Buddy's fur. The retriever turned and began paddling towards the shore, the weight of the boy slowing him down but not stopping him. On the shore, a crowd had gathered, their faces etched with worry as they watched the incredible scene unfold. Claire was on her knees, sobbing, while David stood frozen, his fists clenched in helplessness. Finally, Buddy reached the shallow part of the lake. Ethan's father waded into the water, scooping up his son and holding him tightly. "He's okay," David shouted, his voice thick with emotion. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, but all eyes remained on Buddy, who climbed out of the water, drenched and panting. The golden retriever stood there for a moment, shaking the water off his fur before trotting over to Claire, who threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Buddy simply wagged his tail, as if to say, "I was just doing my job." Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story that would touch hearts far beyond the village. The village had never seen such a warm summer day. The clear skies and the soft breeze had lured everyone outdoors, filling the lake with the sound of laughter and splashing water. Ethan, a lively 7-year-old boy, was no exception. He was an explorer at heart, always finding his way into little adventures. Today, his curious gaze had settled on the small wooden dock at the far end of the lake, a spot where no one seemed to be. Ethan's parents, David and Claire, had set up a picnic nearby, trusting that their son wouldn't stray far. But Ethan, drawn by the allure of the dock and the mystery it held, wandered away. As he reached the dock, the wood creaked beneath his tiny feet, but he was too caught up in his imagination to notice. To him, the dock was a pirate ship, and the lake was a vast ocean waiting to be conquered. What Ethan didn't know was that the dock was old and unstable, its wooden planks weathered by years of rain and sun. As he inched closer to the edge, the boards groaned under his weight. He crouched down, staring at his reflection in the shimmering water, and leaned forward just a little too far. The next moment, the weak wood gave way with a loud crack, and Ethan plunged into the cold water below. For a few seconds, everything seemed still. Then came the frantic splashing as Ethan tried to keep his head above water. Panic surged through him as he realized how deep the water was. His small arms flailed, and he gasped for air, the coldness of the lake sapping his strength. Buddy, the golden retriever who had been lounging under a tree nearby, heard the commotion. His ears perked up, and he immediately stood, his keen eyes scanning the lake. Buddy was no ordinary stray. He had always been attuned to the people of the village, as if he had a sixth sense for trouble. The sight of Ethan struggling in the water triggered something deep within him, a need to act. Meanwhile, on the shore, Ethan's parents were just beginning to notice their son's absence. David's eyes swept over the crowd of children playing by the water, but Ethan was nowhere to be seen. Claire's voice wavered as she called out his name, the first seeds of panic taking root. When her eyes finally landed on the broken dock and the ripples in the water, her heart sank. "David," she screamed, pointing toward the dock. In an instant, they were both running, their picnic forgotten. The crowd began to gather, their cheerful chatter replaced by murmurs of concern as they followed the couple's panicked gazes to the water. But before anyone could act, Buddy was already on the move. He bolted toward the lake, his strong legs propelling him forward with remarkable speed. Without hesitation, he leapt into the water, the splash echoing across the now silent lakeshore. Ethan, struggling to stay afloat, felt his energy slipping away. The cold water seemed to pull him deeper each time he resurfaced. Just as his head went under again, he felt something brush against him. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then he felt it again, something solid and warm. Buddy had reached him. The golden retriever swam to his side, his body acting as a lifeline for the terrified boy. Ethan instinctively grabbed onto Buddy's fur, his small fingers clutching tightly as the dog began to swim back toward the shore. The crowd watched in awe as Buddy paddled through the water, the weight of the boy making every stroke an effort. Claire was on her knees, tears streaming down her face, while David stood frozen, his fists clenched helplessly. "Come on, Buddy," someone whispered from the crowd, their voice filled with hope. With every stroke, Buddy pushed forward, his determination unwavering. The closer he got to the shore, the louder the crowd's cheers became. Finally, his paws found the lake's shallow bed, and he began to walk, pulling Ethan along with him. David rushed into the water, scooping Ethan into his arms the moment they reached the shore. The boy was coughing and crying, but he was alive. "You're okay, Buddy," David whispered, his voice trembling. As the crowd erupted into applause, Buddy climbed out of the water, his golden fur drenched but his tail wagging proudly. Claire knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around the dog in a gesture of pure gratitude. "You saved him," she whispered, her voice breaking. Buddy licked her face as if to say, "It's what I do." Little did anyone know, the bond forged between Ethan and Buddy that day would lead to a story far greater than anyone could have imagined. The scene was electric, a moment suspended in time. Ethan had been pulled ashore, coughing and shivering in his father's arms, but the focus of the crowd remained on Buddy, the golden retriever who had just braved the lake's depths to save the young boy. The applause was deafening, yet Buddy seemed unfazed, his eyes scanning Ethan as if making sure the boy was truly safe. Claire knelt beside Ethan, wrapping a towel around him and stroking his wet hair. "You're okay, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But her attention was quickly drawn to Buddy, whose soaked fur clung to his body as he stood a few feet away, watching the family with quiet intensity. As if sensing their gratitude, Buddy finally wagged his tail, a small but heartfelt gesture. Claire reached out to him, her hand trembling. "Come here, boy," she said softly, her voice breaking. Buddy stepped closer, his ears perked up, and allowed Claire to pull him into an embrace. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement, began to gather closer. "That dog's a hero," someone shouted, and the sentiment rippled through the group. People reached out to pet Buddy, their hands brushing over his drenched fur, but the golden retriever's attention remained fixed on Ethan. Ethan, now sitting up, locked eyes with Buddy. The boy's lips quivered, not from the cold, but from an overwhelming surge of emotion. "He saved me," Ethan said in a small, awestruck voice. "He knew I was in trouble." David knelt beside them, placing a hand on Buddy's head. "You're incredible, Buddy," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't know how we can ever thank you." But before the moment could settle, a sharp gasp came from someone in the crowd. "Wait, I think I've seen that dog before," an elderly woman said, stepping forward. Her weathered face softened as recognition dawned. "That's Buddy, the stray who's been wandering the village. I've seen him by the old farm." A murmur of realization spread through the crowd. Buddy wasn't just any dog, he was a stray, one who had lived on the outskirts of the village for years. Despite having no home, he had always been friendly, often seen watching over the children playing in the fields or resting under the shade of a tree by the lake. "He's always been looking out for us," another villager added. And today, he saved a life. The weight of Buddy's actions sank in, and the crowd's admiration grew. But amid the applause and chatter, Ethan spoke again, his voice quiet but firm. "Can we keep him?" he asked, looking up at his parents with wide, hopeful eyes. Claire and David exchanged a glance, their emotions mirrored in each other's expressions. They had always loved animals, but they had never considered adopting a stray, until now. "What do you think, Buddy?" Claire asked, turning to the dog. Buddy tilted his head, as if considering the question. Then, with a decisive wag of his tail, he stepped closer to Ethan and licked the boy's cheek, eliciting a giggle that broke through the tension of the moment. The decision was made. "I think he's already chosen us," David said with a smile, reaching out to scratch behind Buddy's ears. The crowd cheered once more, this time for the new bond that had been forged. Someone offered to bring food and supplies for Buddy, while others promised to help the family set up a proper space for their new companion. It was a collective celebration, a moment that brought the entire village together. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in hues of gold and pink, the family walked back to their picnic spot, with Buddy trotting happily by their side. Ethan held tightly to Buddy's fur, his laughter filling the air as he recounted the story of his rescue to anyone who would listen. Claire watched them, heart swelling with gratitude. She knew that Buddy wasn't just a pet, he was a protector, hero, and now a part of their family. And as she looked at the dog who had risked everything to save her son, she realized that they hadn't just rescued Buddy, he had rescued them too. The village would always remember the day Buddy became a hero, but for Ethan and his family, it was the day they gained a lifelong friend, one who had shown them the true meaning of loyalty and love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the lake, the once chaotic scene began to settle. Ethan, now wrapped snugly in a dry blanket, sat between his parents on the picnic mat, his shivers subsiding. Buddy lay beside him, his golden fur still damp but drying quickly under the gentle strokes of Ethan's small hands. "Mom, do you think Buddy knew I was in trouble?" Ethan asked, his voice soft but curious. Claire smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I think he did, sweetheart. He saw you, and he knew he had to help." She glanced at Buddy, who looked up at her with calm, intelligent eyes as if he understood every word. Nearby, the villagers lingered, unwilling to leave after witnessing such an extraordinary event. Many shared their own stories about Buddy, the mysterious stray who always seemed to appear when someone needed him. "I remember seeing him by the schoolyard last winter," a young woman said. "He stood there all afternoon, watching the kids play, like he was their silent guardian. And I once saw him chase off a fox that was getting too close to the hens on our farm," added an elderly man. "He's always been looking out for this village." The tales brought a sense of unity and awe to the crowd. They realized that Buddy had always been more than just a stray dog. He had been a protector, a quiet presence that had woven itself into the fabric of their lives without them fully realizing it. As the villagers began to disperse, one by one, they approached Buddy, patting his head or scratching behind his ears. "You're a good boy, Buddy," one man said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for what you did today. Buddy wagged his tail in response, but his attention remained focused on Ethan, who was now whispering to him about all the adventures they'd have together. Back at home, the family prepared a special space for Buddy. David brought out an old dog bed that had been stored in the attic, while Claire set out a bowl of food and water in the kitchen. You'll stay here with us from now on, Buddy, Claire said, kneeling beside the dog. No more wandering around looking for scraps or sleeping in the cold. You're part of the family now. Buddy seemed to understand. He licked Claire's hand before trotting over to Ethan, who was busy arranging a pile of toys near the bed. These are for you, Buddy, Ethan said, holding up a stuffed bear. You can have Mr. Fluffy. He's my favorite. David chuckled as he watched the scene unfold. Looks like someone's already spoiling him. Claire laughed softly, but couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by gratitude. She reached for David's hand. He saved our son's life, she whispered. How do you even begin to repay that? David looked at Buddy, who was now rolling over on the floor as Ethan scratched his belly. By giving him the love and home he deserves, he replied. That night, as the family settled in, Buddy chose to sleep at the foot of Ethan's bed. The boy, who had been exhausted from the day's events, had fallen asleep clutching Buddy's paw. Claire peeked into the room and felt a lump rise in her throat. He's not just a dog, she whispered to David. He's a guardian angel. David nodded in agreement. And he's where he belongs now. In the days that followed, Buddy became a local legend. The villagers often stopped by to check on him, bringing treats and toys as tokens of their gratitude. Children from the neighborhood would visit just to play with him, and Buddy, ever the gentle soul, welcomed them all with wagging tails and affectionate nudges. But for Ethan and his family, Buddy was much more than a hero. He was a loyal friend who had brought them closer together, reminding them of the simple yet profound joys of unconditional love. Whenever Ethan recounted the story of how Buddy saved his life, his eyes would light up with wonder. He's not just a dog, he'd say to anyone who'd listen. He's my best friend. And Buddy, lying contentedly by his side, seemed to agree. The days following Buddy's heroic rescue of Ethan were filled with love and admiration for the brave dog. Buddy, now a permanent member of Ethan's family, seemed to settle in effortlessly. Yet, beneath the tranquil surface, a new challenge quietly emerged, one that would once again test the bond between Buddy and his new family. It started on an overcast afternoon when Ethan's family decided to take Buddy for a walk near the lake. The area, now a symbol of both danger and salvation, had become a favorite spot for the family to unwind. As Ethan tossed a stick for Buddy to chase, a man approached from the opposite direction. He wore a weather jacket and carried an air of quiet authority. Is that Buddy? The man asked, his voice firm but not unkind. Claire, sensing the man's familiarity with the dog, replied cautiously. Yes, this is Buddy. Do you know him? The man nodded, his expression a mix of relief and resolve. I've been looking for him. His real name is Max. He was my dog before he ran away. The words hit like a thunderclap. Ethan froze mid-throw, the stick dropping from his hand. What do you mean? He asked, his voice trembling. Buddy belongs to us now. The man sighed, kneeling to meet Ethan's gaze. Max, Buddy, was part of my family for years. He disappeared during a storm a while back. I've been searching for him ever since. He's a good dog. The best, really. Claire and David exchanged uneasy glances. They couldn't deny the man's sincerity, but the idea of losing Buddy, who becomes such an integral part of their lives, was unbearable. Over the next few days, the family grappled with the possibility of having to let Buddy go. Ethan was inconsolable, refusing to eat or sleep. Buddy saved me, he sobbed. He's my best friend. He can't leave. Claire tried her best to comfort her son. I know how much you love him, sweetheart. But if he really does belong to someone else, we have to think about what's best for Buddy. But we're his family now. Ethan cried. David, torn between doing what was right and protecting his son's happiness, decided to investigate further. He contacted the man and asked him to provide proof that Buddy was truly his dog. The man brought photos, each one showing Buddy, then called Max, playing fetch, lounging on a couch, or curled up by a fireplace. Ethan reluctantly looked at the photos and couldn't deny the resemblance. But he loves us now, he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. As the conflict escalated, Buddy seemed to sense the tension. He stayed close to Ethan, his watchful eyes following the boy wherever he went. But one evening, as the family sat around the dinner table discussing their options, Buddy surprised everyone. The man had been invited over to spend time with Buddy, hoping to rekindle their bond. When Buddy saw him, his tail wagged hesitantly. The man knelt down, calling him by his old name, Max. For a moment, Buddy froze, as if caught between two worlds. Ethan clung to his mother, whispering, "What if he remembers him? What if he leaves?" Buddy stepped forward, sniffing the man's outstretched hand. But instead of leaping into his arms, he turned and walked back to Ethan, resting his head in the boy's lap. The gesture was clear. Buddy had made his choice. The man sighed, a bittersweet smile on his face. "He's happy here," he admitted. "It's obvious how much you all love him. Maybe this is where he's meant to be now." Relief washed over Ethan and his family, but they weren't prepared for what the man said next. "But I want to stay in his life. Max, Buddy means the world to me, too. Maybe I can visit him sometimes, if that's okay." David extended a hand, sealing the agreement. "Of course. You're always welcome here." Buddy's family has grown bigger now. In the following weeks, the man became a regular visitor, bringing treats and sharing stories about Buddy's past. Ethan, who had initially viewed him as a threat, grew to appreciate the bond the man shared with Buddy. It was a compromise that allowed everyone to feel at peace. Buddy, now surrounded by love from all sides, seemed happier than ever. Whether fetching sticks with Ethan, lounging by the fireplace with Claire, or reliving old memories with his former owner, he had found his place in a world that embraced him wholeheartedly. The conflict that had once threatened to tear them apart ultimately brought them closer, proving that love, when shared, only grows stronger. The long, turbulent period of uncertainty regarding Buddy's fate had finally come to an end. Through a combination of love, compassion, and compromise, the family had found a resolution that brought peace to everyone involved. What started as a moment of heartbreak had evolved into a beautiful story of reconciliation, with Buddy at the heart of it all. Ethan sat on the porch, Buddy by his side. The summer sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the landscape. It was a peaceful moment, one that had seemed impossible just a few weeks ago. After the tension of the conflict, the family had come to terms with their new reality. Buddy was part of their family, but his connection to his former owner, the man who had once loved him as a companion, had not been severed. It was a new beginning, one that was grounded in shared love and mutual respect. The man, whose name was Richard, had become a welcome presence in their lives. Rather than feeling like an intruder, he had become a friend, someone who respected Ethan and his family's love for Buddy while still cherishing his own past with the dog. On weekends, Richard would visit, and Buddy seemed to sense the balance between his two worlds. There was no longer any tension, no more confusing choices to be made. Buddy had decided who he wanted to be with, but he didn't have to choose between love from one family or the other. He had two families who cared for him deeply, and both were willing to share him. This arrangement, while unconventional, worked in the most beautiful way. Richard and Ethan's family had forged an unspoken bond, one that transcended ownership. It was an understanding that Buddy's love wasn't limited, that there was enough room in his heart for both of them. One afternoon, Richard invited the family to a special gathering by the lake, a place where so much had happened, where Buddy had first proven his loyalty and love to Ethan. It was also the place where Buddy had been torn between two worlds, and now it would be the setting of a celebration. The sun hung low over the water, and the atmosphere was calm. Richard had set up a small picnic with a blanket spread out and food ready to be shared. As the family gathered together, there was an air of quiet joy, the kind that only comes when a difficult chapter has finally been closed. Richard stood up and raised a glass, looking around at the family who had made his past dog feel like part of their own. To Buddy, he said, his voice filled with warmth, "And to the love that brought us all together." Ethan grinned, raising his glass as well. To Buddy. Buddy, wagging his tail with delight, sat by their feet, his eyes gleaming as he watched the people who loved him gather around. For once, he seemed completely at peace, no longer torn between two homes, but content in the knowledge that he was wanted and cherished by everyone in his life. As the weeks went by, the bond between the family and Richard continued to strengthen. Buddy's role in their lives remained unchanged. He was still the dog who had saved Ethan's life, still the loyal companion who brought joy to their days. But now there was a deeper connection between all of them, one built on understanding, patience, and the realization that love doesn't have to be confined to a single person or family. Buddy's visits with Richard became a source of joy for everyone. Richard would bring Buddy's favorite treats, and Ethan would eagerly show him the new tricks that Buddy had learned. The two families would share stories, reminisce about their experiences with Buddy, and create new memories together. It was no longer about ownership or rivalry. It was about a shared love for a dog who had brought them all closer. And as time passed, Buddy continued to thrive. His once troubled past had been replaced with a future full of love and belonging. No longer did he have to struggle between two worlds. He had found a place where he was loved, honored, and valued by all. Whether playing in the yard with Ethan, cuddling up to Claire on a couch, or going for walks by the lake with Richard, Buddy was a dog who was finally at peace. The resolution of this story was not just about Buddy's choice, but about the family's willingness to embrace change, to grow together, and to understand that love in all its forms is a gift to be shared. It was a reminder that the bonds we form with others are not limited by ownership or possession, but are defined by the depth of our connection and the love we give. As Buddy lay down by Ethan's feet that evening, content and happy, it was clear that the journey that had started with a crisis had led them all to a place of hope and understanding. And for Buddy, it was more than just a happy ending. It was the beginning of a life filled with love, community, and endless possibilities. The family, now complete in their love for each other and for Buddy, continued to live their lives with a renewed sense of purpose. The bond between them had only grown stronger, and it was a testament to the power of love, both given and received. The resolution had not only changed Buddy's life, but it also transformed everyone who was lucky enough to be a part of his story. As the story of Buddy's rescue and the impact he had on Ethan's life reached its natural conclusion, a sense of peace and fulfillment settled over the family. The struggles, the conflict, and the heartache had all led to a resolution that was as beautiful as it was unexpected. Buddy's journey had changed everything, not only for the boy he saved, but for the people who had been touched by his loyalty, love, and courage. Ethan sat in the warm embrace of his family, surrounded by the love of those who had witnessed his life being saved by an unlikely hero, a dog who had once been a stranger. Buddy, now content and fulfilled, was by his side, a reminder of the incredible bond that had been forged between them. It wasn't just the love of a pet. It was the realization that true friendship and loyalty know no bounds. For Buddy, there were no barriers. He had shown love, unwavering courage, and a deep sense of responsibility that had been life-changing for Ethan and his family. The once struggling relationship between Buddy, Ethan's family, and Richard had blossomed into something beautiful. The families that had been at odds now coexisted harmoniously, each understanding that their shared love for Buddy had the power to unite them. There was no longer a need for division or rivalry, only the peaceful coexistence of two families, brought together by their mutual care for one remarkable dog. Buddy had given them all more than they could have ever expected. He had not only saved Ethan's life, but had also changed the way they saw the world around them. The dog who had once been a stray, wandering in search of a new home, had found something far more valuable, a family that loved him unconditionally and a community willing to support him. In return, Buddy had taught everyone the power of loyalty, kindness, and the importance of making room for love in all its forms. As the family gathered together for one last moment of reflection, Ethan looked down at Buddy, who was now resting peacefully by his side. A sense of deep gratitude filled his heart as he realized how far they had come from that fateful day at the lake. The fear and uncertainty had given way to love and security. Buddy was no longer just a dog to them. He was family. "We owe everything to Buddy," Ethan said softly, looking up at his parents. "If it weren't for him, I don't know what would have happened." His mother smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "He saved you, Ethan. But in the end, we all saved each other." As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the landscape, the family stood together, joined in their shared love for Buddy. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but it had brought them to a place of understanding and acceptance. They had learned that love is not just about ownership. It's about the bonds we create, the moments we share, and the ways we choose to support one another. Buddy had completed his journey with them. He had given his heart, his loyalty, and his courage, and in return, he had received the love of an entire family. It was a beautiful story of transformation, healing, and the incredible impact that animals can have on our lives. Buddy's story is a reminder that love knows no limits, and that even the smallest acts of kindness can lead to life-changing transformations. If you believe in the power of unconditional love and the bonds that animals form with humans, don't forget to share this story with your friend and family. Let Buddy's journey inspire you to never give up on the ones you love and to always make room for the unexpected heroes in your life. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any heartwarming stories like Buddy's. And remember, there's always a place for love, no matter how unexpected it may be. Until next time, stay kind, stay compassionate, and keep believing in the power of love.